Hello, everybody. Welcome back. Oh my gosh, I am mentally and physically exhausted this week going into peak week, but I am also at the same time so excited, so grateful for the opportunity, and I'm just genuinely pumped for the weekend. So this week is the first week I'm actually taking off one-on-one coaching just so that I can really focus, because obviously I really need to be dialed in for this week. And there's just so many extra things that you have to be a little bit more considerate and mindful of with your peak week food, sodium, fluid, things like that. And just the ability to focus and like nail your posing and get prepared mentally for the weekend. But before I dive into kind of my peak plan, which I want to go over with you guys, I want to review my last week's data, kind of tell you how that went, what I was able to accomplish in terms of fat loss, and then my training, and then we'll dive into peak week and all the questions that you guys submitted. So I know on my Instagram story yesterday morning, I put up a little question box and asked you guys if you had anything that you wanted me to talk about in this video to drop it. So I've got all of those questions pulled up. So thank you so much. I think I'll be able to get through most of them just with some short answers. And I think in the peak week description, I'll be able to explain a lot of those questions that you had as well. So let's first dive in. I'm going to make my screen a little bit bigger so that we can just kind of hone in on the last 7 days here. So it was Monday, the 28th of April through to the 4th, which was yesterday. So if we first take a look at my weigh-in column, I actually came down on average by 1 pound, or 1.07 of a pound. So I actually had a light weigh-in yesterday at 126.4, and my average weekly weight came in at 127.4. So this is kind of around the numbers that I was thinking that I was going to be. I think probably closer to this 126 number is where I need to be on show day to kind of look my best. So I'm feeling much more confident, and I'm so glad that I just kind of paused for a moment before making a decision for that Orlando Girl Power show. I probably could have done it and done okay, but I wanted to be sure and certain about it. And after kind of watching that show online, it gave me good confidence about the decisions that I'd made, and obviously moving into this week's Pittsburgh Pro, which is going to be, by the way, the third biggest show of the year. Like, this thing is just wrapping up to be massive. There are so many, I guess, people coming in from overseas, out of state influencers, because of the men's bodybuilding now being held at this show. So normally it's not, but inviting all those people, we've got a lot of just celebrity guests that are going to be there, which is just great for the sport and just kind of brings the hype factor to the next level. So I'm actually really pumped for the whole weekend, not just my show as well. So I'm ready to get going, but happy with my weigh-in. So I've come down by 1 pound this week. To look over to my nutrition, you can see here I had 97% compliance to my calories, which is really great. 98% compliant to my protein as well. So a pretty good week in terms of caloric compliance, or just compliance in general. It was really tough, honestly. I think just with the extra cardio that I added in, obviously in these last couple of weeks, gosh, it made a massive difference to my appetite, and it made a massive difference to my energy levels. So, I was kind of plugging along, things were going relatively smoothly. And obviously as I hit that plateau, in order to really take the next step in terms of fat loss, I had to make some big adjustments, and oh my gosh, did I feel it. So I'm so glad that this is the last week. I've got a couple more days on these low calories, and then we'll start to introduce a little bit more energy from carbohydrates and things like this, so that I can start to fill out my muscle in preparation for the show on the weekend. But my average fiber did come down a little bit, so I have to assume that a small amount of the fat loss, or this weight change, I should say, that we can see here is probably coming from the subtle drop in my fiber. You can see my last week average was at 20 grams. I'm just highlighting that on the screen now. And then this past week was 15, so it was a little bit less. And then looking at my sodium, and that was something that I had to track specifically to do my peak week plan. So they've kind of been pretty close as well. Now, one of the things I will say is I don't enter in any like added salt that I add to my food. So what I am always really mindful of when I'm doing my peak week, that I'm eating similar kinds of foods, I'm salting the same way, and honestly, I've been doing the same kinds of meals for quite some time. So I feel pretty comfortable in ensuring that those numbers are within, say, 10 to 20% of what they normally are, which is what you want to do in a peak week. You don't want to do anything radical or, I guess, really big in terms of changes in your sodium or fluid. So yeah, I guess a lot more adherent to my original calorie target this past week. So I came in on average at 102 grams of carbohydrate and then 29 grams of fat, which is kind of getting down to like the calorie floor that we've talked about previously, because I don't want to become micronutrient deficient, and I certainly don't want to become, I guess, deficient in any of the essential fatty acids and things that really help keep your hormones in balance and doing the things that they need to do. So that's kind of right on the cutoff there for me. And again, I wouldn't be able to take them any lower if I wanted to. So yeah, very happy with the overall nutrition compliance, and I was still able to fit in, I think 2 meals out over Friday and Saturday. Don't ask me what they were. I cannot recall. Oh no, that's right. Yesterday. So we went for a big walk up to, it's called the Barcelona Wine Bar, but they have a really nice like Mediterranean tapas style menu. And we ordered, it was like a half grazing plate that was 4 different types of protein. I'll put some videos up on the screen here for you so that you can see what we had ordered. And the original menu had pork and sausage included, as well as steak and chicken. So I was like, oh, well, I like the idea of, a lean steak and some chicken. That obviously can fit with my requirements, but I'm not so certain that I want to waste any fats because I don't have very many on pork and sausage. So I talked to the waitress and, she was like, yeah, that's fine if you want to double up on those 2, no worries. So when it came out, I was like, oh my God, this is a half serving. I'd hate to see what a full serving looked like. So I was able to enjoy that. We ordered, it came with like a side salad after some Mediterranean veggies. I think they were like pickled or fermented, and they had like olives as well. And then Sam ordered, I think it was like a side of arancini, like cheese, mozzarella balls, and some other kind of cheese, manchego cheese. Oh my God, I had one of those, which probably took up like 7 or 8 grams of my daily fat, but it was so worth it. It was so delicious. I was just like, oh my God, I could just keep going. So I'll be looking forwards to having a nice, satisfying meal when I get done. But, just to get out of the house again, stretch the legs. It was a beautiful day. So I was very glad that I was still able to kind of, again, live life and compete. Now, it's obviously not quite to the same degree that I would normally in terms of food flexibility, but yeah, we made it fit, which was great. So we bought some of that stuff home. I kind of weighed out what I thought that I had eaten because there was just so much left over. So I did that just as a precautionary rather than like estimating what I really ate. But coming over to have a look at my training for this week. Oh my goodness. So I clocked in 5,682 calories of energy expenditure, which is quite a big shift if we go back just 5 weeks ago. I was sitting consistently around this 3,000 number. So again, this last 1 month as well, I've really had to kind of turn it up to get to where I want to be. And it's this last month that I will tell you guys, this is where it just becomes not sustainable for an average person. And this is why I don't encourage people to go, to have aesthetic goals like a bikini competitor or a physique athlete of any kind if you aren't a physique athlete, because it's so much harder than what most people are willing and or even able to do. Like, this is a lot. Like, for me, that's also working full time, like 80 hours. It's crazy. Like, there isn't a whole lot of balance in these last couple of weeks. And that's kind of, I think, unfortunately, where people would love and aspire to be like when they look at a physique. And, yes, it's possible, but, just because you can doesn't mean that you should. So again, if I wasn't a competitive athlete, I wouldn't be doing the extra steps that are necessary to kind of get to this last little bit of leanness, because it's really, really challenging. So I just wanted to kind of point that out, because I know so many people have commented recently, like when I'm training or on Instagram, and, just compliment your physique, which I think is wonderful. And I'm always so appreciative, but I always kind of say, this is like a professional sport. It's quite a bit different to, I think, what the average person should be aspiring to, just because of, just look at how much we've got to do. But anyhow, I came in at goodness, 2,300 calories of energy expenditure for my training sessions for this week, which is great. We spent a nice couple hours on Sunday getting through a full body workout. And then one of my earlier sessions in the week too proved to be quite a bit of a long one. We went through most of the muscle groups. So again, taking a little bit more time in caloric expenditure. I got all of my runs in, so we came in at, goodness, 762 calories from, I guess, extra cardio, which were moderate intensity. I think one of those runs I clocked like a personal PR for the year, which was like a 7-minute 51 average minute mile, which I was like, whoa, where did that come from? But I had some good tunes on. I was just running, and yeah, I was pleasantly surprised when I looked at my watch. But for the other two, I was like, oh God, running into either a headwind, I was feeling a little bit tired. And those were more like around the mid-8s for my minute mile pace. But it's been so nice to get out and do that. And I think I'll probably try to keep up those runs just for like fitness. Obviously there won't be the same kind of intention to push and go really hard. But I have really enjoyed that. I used to run, a lot, and it's just something that I haven't had the time to be able to fit in of late. And then lots of walking, made sure that I fit in every day, got my walks done, rain, hail or shine. I think some of the days I might have done my walks at like 11:30 at night or something when I'd finally finished all of my coaching check-ins. So obviously that's going to be the priority. Regular life always comes ahead of this stuff because it's just a hobby. That obviously works nicely with my business. I don't know whether I can say it's just a hobby. It supports what we do here in business. But to me, my clients and all of my admin and things always come first. So knocked it out. That came in at 2,600 calories in total for the week. And one of these walks here, I think it was this one, oh my gosh, on Sunday afternoon. I think I'd already done a run. I'd already got my lift in. And then that was when we walked back from the restaurant. And oh my gosh, I was absolutely exhausted. I just hit a wall when I got home and was struggling just to do like meal prep. I think I remember just putting my hands on the counter. I was like, come on, like literally self-talk out loud just to keep the process going so that I had food for this week. But yeah, very happy with how things went. I'm very proud of myself because it's just a lot of work. So yeah, I give myself a pat on the back for this week's efforts. And I also got my average steps in too. You can see they're a little bit lower earlier in the week just with work obligations. So I definitely made sure where I had the time on the weekends to make sure that I got in a little bit extra. So my average just scraped in over that 12,000 per day. So yeah, that was my last 7 days, helping get me down another pounds. And I really think based on the videos that you can probably see here, I'll put up some of the posing and just a couple of quick clips from my training sessions. I can definitely see, the change in physique. I've got a lot more like lines coming through, a bit more striation. And I'm going to have to be mindful of that when I get on stage on the weekend. I don't need to overpose because bikini, you don't need striations, but the downside is you do need a certain aesthetic on your rear end. And I think I've said to you guys many times over now, like the backs of my hamstrings are where I hold the most body fat, and they are just disproportionately more fat than everywhere else. Everything everywhere else is like striations. And then there's my hamstrings. So I just have to kind of down pose everything else, just no flexing, nothing like that. It will just be kind of just, a relaxed pose. Not a whole lot of tension will be required, or I will end up revealing something that I don't want for the competition. So it's definitely a bit of a balancing act. But let's go over and have a look to my peak week plan. I'll blow this up a little bit just so that you guys can see now. Please note, and I know that some of you guys are probably like super curious about this, and maybe this is something that you could use yourselves. Do not use this particular program for yourself. It is specific to all of my past couple of weeks averages. This will not work for everybody, even down to the process that I'm doing this week. There are so many different peaking protocols that you can implement. There is front loading protocols, there's back loading protocols, and both of those basically just require your carbohydrate load to come in at different times throughout the week. Personally, I've always opted for a safer, more conservative approach, which is front loading. And that process typically involves a much greater proportion of your carbohydrate intake to come in at the beginning of the week. And for me, The reason that I choose that is it allows me time to kind of see how my body responds to the higher carbohydrate. And it gives me the opportunity, as I get closer and closer to the show, to make some tweaks or put the brakes on if we overshot and overcalculated based on how your body's responding. And again, your body is going to respond a little bit differently to your carbohydrate consumption, depending on what kind of diet approach you've taken. If you've been extremely aggressive towards the last few weeks of your cut, as I have had to, with much lower carbohydrate, your body's functions and the way that we metabolize carbohydrates probably going to slow down. So despite me being a more muscular individual and maybe having slightly higher carb requirements, just because I take in enough to kind of fill out, my glycogen stores, it doesn't mean that it's going to happen as quickly as I want to because of the down regulation of some of those processes. So I much prefer to take the conservative approach by doing a front-loaded carb protocol, and then I kind of just ease through the last couple of days, and then we hit it hard on show day. But for this week, I want to go through what I'm going to be doing. So you can see here, Monday through to Wednesday. So what I'm highlighting on the screen, I'm just sticking to like what I would consider slightly below my maintenance calories. So I calculated my maintenance calories based on what I lost over the last 2 weeks. So if we go back and have a look, and I have an equation and a calculation that has been up online for years about how to calculate your maintenance calories, if you'd like to do the same thing. But basically, I just took these 2 weeks here and took the average. So I'm pretty sure my average loss over the last 2 weeks was about 0.9 of a pound or 408 grams. So with that being the case, my maintenance calories right now are around 1583 based on what fat I have lost or weight loss I have, or what weight loss has accrued over the last 2 weeks. But keep in mind, if I went straight back to maintenance calories this week, number one, yes, I'm going to see my weight change. But number two, that would mean that I do start to look quite a bit different because we're reintroducing carbohydrates. And I don't necessarily want to do anything that's too aggressive or change anything too quickly. So even though I wouldn't necessarily gain back body fat, I'm going to go in conservative this week because I do not want to risk, because of all those down regulated processes, that I just look watery and terrible going into the show. So I'm actually going to stay at a number that's slightly lower than what I know my current maintenance is, at least for the next couple of days. But I do want to get some glycogen back in the tank. Otherwise, number one, I'm going to start to feel exhausted. And I'm not going to get to the weekend because I'll be too tired and just not perform very well. But I do want to make sure that I still look much the same as what I do right now, which is where I'm very happy. So with that being said, I'm giving myself obviously my normal protein intake right up until Wednesday. And then I'm giving myself a little bit more flexibility with my carbohydrates. Remember, I was at 100 grams. I'm taking that up to 120 just for the next 3 days. I'm literally getting 60 grams more carbohydrate over the next few days. And then I'm also keeping my fats kind of around where I have been for the last few days as well. Obviously not really changing my fiber. My fiber average for the last couple of weeks has been 17 grams. So again, without disrupting the peace and the harmony, I'm keeping things much the same. I don't want to have way more fiber suddenly, which then is going to contribute to a bloated, distended belly. We don't want that. I'm going to be keeping similar foods all this week, so there isn't anything that causes me to get upset, ill, or sick. And then same for my sodium. So I looked at my average sodium for the last 2 weeks based on my normal food choices. It's actually a little bit lower than I thought. It's around 1808. Typically, my sodium intake used to be around 3,000, but just with some of the changes in sauces and dressings and things that I've been using over this prep, it is actually a little bit lower. I was kind of surprised at that. So anyhow, I have to go with what's been normal for me for the last couple of weeks. Obviously, if you were doing your peak, yours could look radically different. I think I just did a couple of peak plans over the last 2 or 3 weekends for clients, and some of them are up as high as 6,000. Some of them are in the threes. I mean, I've seen all kinds of numbers. So again, please don't use my numbers. This is, specific to my averages. And then also all this week, normal fluid. we don't want to be changing those things. Your body does a fantastic job at maintaining homeostasis. So if I go and suddenly change my salt intake or I change my fluid intake, my body is going to auto-correct. It's going to self-adjust to make sure that my solute load remains within the normal range. So to me, it just makes sense to keep everything, relatively stable so that we don't have any big fluctuations and changes in how your body is looking. So yeah, up until Wednesday, I'll also be doing normal training, normal steps. I'll probably try and get in a run or two over the next couple of days and my normal training. And then I think my peak protocol kind of is going to kick in starting on Thursday. Now my show is on Sunday, which is a little bit unusual. I've historically always competed on a Saturday, but because of the men's introduction into the Pittsburgh Pro, they've now kind of hijacked and have the entire Saturday. So all the ladies divisions are going to be competing on Sunday. So I basically had to bump everything forwards one day, which is fine. So for Thursday, you'll notice here that I've pulled my protein down a little bit, and that's kind of just to offset calories so that I can increase my carbohydrate. Again, we want to fill out your muscle. We want that glycogen to move into those cells. We want to pull water into the cells. And often, unfortunately, we'll hear people say, oh, I looked terrible. I mistimed my carb loading, or I, missed my peak. Sometimes that's just due to the fact that you were never really lean enough in the first place to even need to worry about some of this stuff. And that's a harsh reality. But I have seen, competitors come in and they'll want a peak plan, a couple of weeks out, and, they'll ask me to do it for them. And I will see their pictures and they just don't need it. Manipulating all of these variables for somebody that still has quite a bit of body fat actually wouldn't be necessary. So in those cases, you don't need to. So that being said, I'm going to be taking up my carbohydrates a little bit. I've been more aggressive in the past, but that's in a different federation, different category, different look. I've had to be really strategic with how I am looking for this federation. And like I said, I do not want to be any more muscular. Like I already have a little bit too much muscle in certain areas. So I'm trying to downplay certain things by not posing. I don't want to be too full. So these numbers are a little bit lower than what I would typically recommend for a standard peak for a bikini competitor. So I'm only going in at about 1.5 times what I would normally do for my average carbohydrate over the last couple of weeks. So that brings me up to 175 grams of carbs as my normal. So again, I've got clients that will, if we use the same factors, they'd be up around 300 just based on their normal carbohydrate consumption. So again, it's so individualized based on what you've been doing throughout your contest prep. And then you'll notice I've also reduced my fat intake again. That's just to offset calories. I do not want to be in a surplus this week. I don't want to be gaining back body fat. I need to maintain my shreds, but I do want to fill out some of that muscle as well. So we're kind of moving those around to accommodate more carbohydrate. And then I also like to taper down my sodium just a little bit when I am adding really high or higher carbohydrates, just so that we can kind of maintain, again, a normal solute load. And then Friday, I should probably also say my fluid will be normal on that day as well. I actually haven't got that filled in there. We'll put that in. My steps will start to come down. So as I get closer and closer to show day, we want to kind of start eliminating things that are inflammatory provoking. So resistance training is obviously one of the things that's going to do that. Lots of cardio, lots of walking. We're going to start to wind that back. So you can see here, by Saturday, I'm actually bringing things right back to literally half of what I normally do. And you can actually see here, so by the end of the week, by Saturday, I'm actually going to be down at 6,000 steps. So I'm literally halving the amount of steps that I'm doing. And it's basically like a rest day, which is quite nice. And then as far as my training is concerned, in the lead up to the competition on Sunday, again, it also tapers down. So I kind of started around 60 minutes on Thursday, lower RPE than what I normally train at, and then basically reducing it and scaling it all the way back to just like a 30-minute full body circuit. at an RPE or an intensity of about 5. So very light the day before. That's literally just to help move some of that carbohydrate into the muscles, so that you're looking good for a show day, but nothing inflammatory provoking, no drop sets, nothing new, that's for sure. You want to keep things pretty much status quo so that you don't have any excessive soreness for a show day when you're trying to look good and move well. So coming across to have a look at my Fridays plan. So again, I'll be keeping my protein a little bit lower to offset some of the slightly higher calories that will come in from my carbohydrate. And then I'm going to be just gauging on how I am looking. If I have still lost a lot of body fat this week, well, then I'm going to bring those numbers up. So I'm going to be keeping an eye on how I'm looking every day and making some of those adjustments. And that would be something that I would do also with my clients. If they are reporting still dropping weight in their peak week, which would absolutely not be okay in most cases, we would want to manually make some adjustments if we needed to. So I'll be doing that for myself as well. My fiber will probably come down a little bit on those couple of days. Again, I just want to make sure, because I have a slow GI and a long GI, I think most of the time, like somewhere between 36 and 48 hours is the time that it'll take for something to actually pass. So knowing that I have like a slower GI, I want to really bring those down so that I've had plenty of time for everything to kind of clear out and I don't have any distension or bloating. And again, you'll notice that my sodium is a little bit lower than my normal. And again, that was just to offset slightly higher carbohydrates here on Friday. And then Saturday is a big old question mark, guys. Like, I never solidify anything until that day. I do the same thing with clients and it works within a range. So I've got a pretty big span here. If I'm looking flat as a pancake and I'm way too lean, which I assume that I'm not going to let myself get to that point, but if I were to wake up suddenly on Saturday morning and I'm like, oh my God, like what happened to me? I'm emaciated overnight, maybe super stressed out. If I ended up having to move my body way more than I had anticipated, that could very well happen. But I would also potentially consider taking my carbs all the way up to 222 if I needed to, but lots of big ranges there. You can see my protein is between 96 and 120. My carbs could be between 81 or as low as 81, but up to as high as 222. And then my fats could also be between 28 and 36, depending on how I am looking on Saturday. Again, you'll notice salt is normal on that day. I might make some tweaks. If I was on the higher end, I'd probably bring it down a little bit, again, just to help keep things, normal. So yeah, that's my my peak weeks. I'll be focusing on doing that this week, and it is a little bit challenging to make sure that you nail that, but that's kind of part of the reason why for peak week I don't do as much coaching. I'm just focusing on critical and essential stuff with work so that I can really make sure that I don't mess any of this up, because it's not set out as a meal plan. I do this as I go, and that requires a little bit more time. And some of you who've competed probably are familiar with this process. So on show day, moving across to some of the foods that I like to eat, how I do it. I know there were quite a few questions that you guys had asked me about how this process actually works. And I'm sure some of those questions have already been answered, but they'll be answered with my meals for show days. So I think the first thing to really point out is FODMAPs. So you want to avoid any gut irritants, and there are a lot. And for me with IBS, oh my God, I have to be extra careful, with, not causing any inflammatory, foods to be consumed. And then my gut just looks horrible. And that has happened in previous preps where I've been in another country. I've had to use different brands, and then, not looking or paying attention to the specific ingredients. There's just a curveball in there that's like totally inflammatory. I think one of my years I had xanthan gum from a product. It was like a rice product, like plain rice, but as a binder or an emulsifier or something in a cup of rice, they had xanthan gum. And I was like, you got to be kidding me. So who would have thought? And that basically upset my stomach for the actual show day, which is really disappointing. So I'm going to be taking most of my stuff in my suitcase. And then I'll probably pre-pack a couple of the meals on Friday morning when I'm hopping on the plane. And then there'll be like one or two things maybe that I'll need for this particular day. It's just the unsweetened almond milk, to be honest, that I'll be having to pick up, and maybe the sun butter. But everything else I'm going to pre-make, and I've already got packed and will be with me. So my carb source on show day has varied over the years, but I tend to opt for convenience. I'm not here trying to make the most elaborate special meals. It's here to serve a purpose. I'll eat the nice foods when I get done. So this is literally just helping hit specific sodium, protein, carb, and fat targets for show day. So I love Cocoa Pebbles. I also usually use Frosted Flakes or, I don't know, Cinnamon Toast Crunch, but anything that is a glucose specific carb source, zero FODMAPs. Anything rice corn based is usually what I opt for, which is kind of why I went with the Cocoa Pebbles. And then you'll see my next meal here that I'm highlighting. This is rice. So just very simple, easy digested carbohydrates that are very friendly for anyone with IBS or anybody in general. So I'll be doing a very conservative carb up on show day. I may make a little tweak to this depending on how I'm looking, but based on my past experience, I've done 3 or 4 shows now kind of within this weight range and body composition. I don't think that I need to get as aggressive as I used to because of the nature of this division. It's just not overly muscular. They just want your glutes to pop, which is basically means that you've got to do all the work on the front end to grow muscle because there's less that we can do in manipulating how you look on show day because you don't need to be crazy muscular. So 48 grams of carbs in this particular meal here, or the Cocoa Pebbles, and then I'll do like 60 for my 2-hour out meal. And then I have a little bit of protein with that. So I'm going to be doing ground beef, just unseasoned with rice. And then my fat source will be the sun butter. And again, that's just me picking something that's low FODMAP. I can't have certain types of nuts or any old nut just because they're a FODMAP. So to me, this is like super bland and basic. And then I've got to add a bunch of sodium to this as well. So I'll be taking like my salt shaker and then also my little salt weighing scale to make sure that I have the perfect amount of sodium so that things are completely not off kilter. They want to be really status quo. And this is quite a high amount of sodium for that 2-hour out meal. It's about 1.3 times like my normal total for the day. Like this day's salt content is about 1.3 times higher than what I would normally have on any given day. And then at that meal, it's about 50% of my normal daily average. So yeah, it's much higher. And then what else? I don't normally have anything prior to getting on stage unless I'm just looking, I need to make a couple of little tweaks, in which case it's usually salt or carbs, not fats and protein. Those two are less important. And then for finals, I usually come back in and do the same meal as I did 2 hours out earlier. So it's the same thing, beef, rice, some butter or sun butter, and then a lot of salt to go with it. Again, that's specific to my requirements, my averages with some factors added in there to make sure that things are all normal. And that's going to give me a really nice pump. Obviously, being super vascular isn't as important for bikini, but we can do a little bit of manipulation. So the numbers that I would use for my men's bodybuilders or men's physique athletes is slightly different. And same for even my women's physique and figure girls. And then I get a Reese's cup. Oh my God, can't wait to eat this one. So this is like right before hopping back on stage, before we go out and do, I guess, all of the comparisons with the other competitors and things like that. So yeah, that is one of the few like candies that doesn't have fructose or fructans. Again, I'm avoiding anything that's a FODMAP. I have seen people at the back like housing honey and other like highly irritable or gut irritants. I'm just like, oh gosh, if only you knew what that was going to do. But generally speaking, anything that has a high ratio of fructose to glucose is going to be poorly tolerated. And it's one of the reasons why like the gels for endurance athletes over the years have changed so much. And like the nutritional profile of endurance-based snacks for people that are riding their bikes for many, many hours, all of these things have changed because of what we now know about things causing gut irritation. So this particular Reese's cup that I have is a glucose-based snack. And the other thing that I've also used is like regular Haribo gummy bears. They're glucose-based. But a lot of the candies and I guess tubes and things are fructose or have high fructose corn syrup. Whew, that's a disaster waiting to happen. So yeah, this is kind of the foods that I'll be doing for my actual show day. So nothing kind of exciting, to be honest, but yeah, I guess we're not here to have elaborate meals. It's really to serve a very specific purpose. So with that being said, I want to pop over to some of the questions that you guys had asked me. So I'll just pull those up on the screen for us now. So first question is, what is your show day pre-stage pump up snack treat? I think we kind of just went through that, so nothing exciting. I think I'll be happy when I get to eat my Reese's. I may end up having that earlier in the day if I feel like I need a little bit more carbohydrate and some sodium. But other than that, everything that's listed is what I'll have. Will my water intake stay exactly the same all week? Yeah, so my fluid consumption is literally probably 3 to 4 liters per day, and a couple of those are like just a soda like this. I usually have like a sugar-free Powerade or Gatorade when I'm training, and then like maybe a can or two of like some kind of small soda. So yeah, that will stay the same like every day this week. So I just have a consistent amount of fluid that will not change. Someone asked, how do I have the energy for my workouts on such low calories? I don't, but we're not here to be out and perform very well. It'd be a different conversation if I was like doing a sport that was specifically being done for like athletic performance purposes, like track sprinting or basketball or a team sport or any kind of endurance event, running. I would be fueling my body very, very different. I've got a lot of clients that do performance-based sports, and our protocols are substantially different. And they always laugh at me because they're like, I don't even know how you survive. Based on how much we do. That yeah, you just get it done. I think I'm just used to the discomfort and the sacrifice, and yeah, I guess it gets a little bit easier every year that you do these. Someone asked, does my fiber change? So I think you guys probably just saw it is going to be pretty similar, almost up until 24 to 48 hours out from the show. And then I make a couple of little tweaks just to kind of bring down any residual fiber that's sitting in your gastrointestinal tract. We don't want to be drawing water in and causing bloating and discomfort on show day. And we also don't want to be eating a crazy amount of fiber either, which can help give that unfortunate visible appearance of a distended abdominal. So we want to make sure there's plenty of time to get rid of all that. That's great for the actual prep itself, where you want to manage your hunger and stay healthy. But for these couple of days, that's certainly no longer the priority. We'll get back to the good healthy habits immediately post show. Will I be carb loading into the show? I think we've just talked about that. So up until Wednesday, no, things will stay status quo. I don't want to make any major changes. We'll do a little carb load starting Thursday, which is kind of unusual for me because of the show day being Sunday. Normally I'd do my front loading protocols where I'd have my highest carb day on Monday. But like I said, I'm kind of maintaining the status quo just for the next few days to see how things settle. And then we'll make some adjustments if we need to the day before. Do I track all my veggies precisely? I do. When I'm making recipes, all of my vegetables go onto the scale. So if I've got a recipe in my app, yeah, I will weigh out like how much zucchini is in there, how much whatever. If I'm making a salad and it's a pre-made bag, yes, you bet that I'm dumping the whole salad into a bowl, weighing out how much green cabbage, kale, and whatever is in there is going to weigh, because it does contribute a pretty significant amount to my daily carbohydrate intake. Even though it's like a nice fibrous source and super nutrient rich, it still has calories. And I also need to make sure that I know exactly what my fiber is like so that I can, prepare adequately for show day. Next question, what to do if you can't lift heavier than you've already been doing? I've been stuck for many weeks now. I actually just made some notes over here before because that is a frustrating set of circumstances to be in. So I think the first thing that I would do would be, number one, look to add reps or sets, or even modify the tempo. So you're not always going to be able to jump up to the next weight bracket. Like if you go from the set of 20s to the 25s and the dumbbells, that could be a pretty significant percentage increase. Remember that week over week, like 1 to 2% increases as an experienced lifter would be more than reasonable. You might be talking 5% increases as a brand new beginner, but that does not continue exponentially. There's always a bit of a plateau. So sometimes trying to increase to the next weight bracket or even the pin on a machine isn't possible. So, if that was the case, these are some other alternative ways that you could start to still progress your training volumes, hopefully work towards getting stronger, but without the need to do that. So adding sets, adding repetitions, that might be the best way, or even just slowing down the tempo using the same weights that you've been using. So those would be some options that you could implement. The other thing that you might like to try and do if strength is something that you really want to get better at, then I would recommend adding in some strength-specific rep ranges. So if you're currently doing a hypertrophy program, but you're stuck on an exercise where you've consistently been doing, 8 to 12 reps or something like that, you could also implement one of your training days on that exercise where you perform somewhere between 1 and 6 reps. So specifically work on strength, that is a skill, and then that will help improve your strength adaptations. And then in turn, that might likely help with the carryover to your higher hypertrophy rep ranges. So that's what I would do if I really wanted to improve my overall strength. But just keep in mind, and I just posted a video about this recently. It was talking about the potential for muscle growth increases, or how improvements in muscle size influence muscle strength. And they're not necessarily related to one another. So if you haven't watched that video on YouTube, go and check it out. We reviewed a couple of publications that have looked at this phenomenon. So what I'll say here is, if you just care about building muscle, you don't necessarily have to continuously see improvements in strength, and you may not unless you go and do specific strength work. Provided that you're getting a sufficient amount of volume each week on the muscle groups that you care about growing, and that you're doing a sufficient set number within each session, and that you're training with a high degree of effort, then that is likely going to help you in achieving muscle growth. But strength adaptations are obviously a little bit different here, and it's really something that is a skill and that you need to work on. So I would implement specific strength rep ranges if that's an area that you'd love to get better at. And then the last thing, or actually it's probably the last two things, I would assess your current recovery. So how's your sleep? How's your stress levels? How are your calories? Those can also be things that will influence like your ability to continue to make progress. I know for me, like when I'm dieting, I just forget about the idea that I'm going to make any gains during a prep. I'm literally using the same weight for many, many weeks. Like there's not many things that I have increased in terms of strength over this prep. I've just been happy to maintain and hang on to what I've got. Some of them because I'm just fatigued, not because I've lost meaningful muscle tissue, but I'm just tired. I cannot lift the same amount of weight. So keep that in mind too. And if you haven't taken a deload recently, it could be worth just having a week where you reduce your intensity, you reduce your volume, and that might actually help, get a better result, once you've taken a little bit of time off. So thank you so much for that question. What have we got? The next one, how to counter water retention despite low sodium, healthy diet and exercise. I'm not sure I understand what you mean by counter water retention. So I'm guessing maybe you're experiencing a slight increase in total body water for some reason. You're saying maybe it's not sodium. I think it's important to just recognize the influence that our training has on our total body water levels. So if you're doing a lot of training, it would be normal to expect water retention. If I've got like a push week in my training block or something like that, I fully expect that my body is going to retain fluid, and I don't judge it, or it's not something that I'm critical of. I just understand that this is my body working in response to what I've been putting it through. So remember that training will influence your water retention. There's probably also something to be said for just circulation. So sometimes just a good old massage or having that frequently can help some individuals who don't have great circulation. And I'm sure there are probably 1,000 other things that can potentially contribute to that. I know the menstrual cycle for females, during ovulation and right before we actually get our menses. Those are two time frames where women tend to hold on to a little bit more water because of some of the changes to our progesterone and estrogen levels. So again, I just anticipate that. I don't necessarily try to counter it. I just understand that my body's doing what it's supposed to do, when faced with certain hormonal changes. But if it's uncomfortable or it's negatively contributing to like my performance because my weight goes up 7 pounds overnight and I feel really lethargic and heavy, then I might be mindful to, not have super salty foods, which might only worsen that. I'd probably be mindful not to have crazy high fiber, which is also going to contribute to, fluid retention, especially if you're having osmotic, soluble fiber. And it might also just mean that I'm more mindful of how intense I train if I don't want it to feel that swelling because of these other hormonal factors that are completely out of my control. But I think it's just important to remember that like fluid changes are normal, and we don't necessarily need to, adjust and change them. If it's nothing out of the normal. Does that make sense? So I don't know whether I answered your question, but I hope that helps. The next question is, are there any particular carbs that are best for show day? Again, easy digestible, low FODMAP. For show day, probably something that is moderate to high GI, just so that it's fast absorbing. You're not kind of having something that's a really low glycemic index food that, the time will pass and the carbs never made it into your system. But so usually a modest GI or glycemic index carbohydrate source. And just something that's low gut irritant. So usually low FODMAP. So what I will go for, and I recommend that to anybody that's competing. Someone says, how do you manage your sleep during peak week with sleep disturbances on super low calories? It's been pretty tough. I have been doing on average like 6 hours, like for the last month. I'm just used to that now. And I've also probably done that even when I'm not competing because of my work schedule. So I go to bed around midnight or 1 o'clock and I'm up at 6 or 7. It's kind of been the standard throughout this prep. So there's nothing really different for me, unfortunately. But I don't think I've had any disturbances while sleeping. I think I've just been waking up a little bit earlier. That might be the only thing that I've noticed is like 30 minutes to 45 minutes. I'm waking up earlier now than what I was before just because I'm a little bit hungry. So if I do, I just remind myself, hey, hunger is not going to kill you right now. You are in control of this. Just rest. I'll just lay there and close my eyes, make sure it's nice and dark. And I have like a sound machine, or I guess it's like rainstorms or thunderstorms. I listen to that. So that's usually pretty calming, but it is annoying. Like when you're like, I want to be asleep right now and you can't. So I'm just I don't try and, fight it. I just know that my body is benefiting just by being in bed resting. So I'll just kind of lay there and try to relax and not get too worked up about it. Have you ever noticed low body fat affecting your hormonal menstrual cycle? Yeah, so not this prep. I've actually still had my period, which is great. And I think it's just because it's been a long, slow, steady prep. But historically, when I would bring my dietary fat down too low, under 30 grams, then I would notice some hormonal changes that did impact my hormonal cycle. And then also just the speed at which I've dieted. Aggressive doesn't really work anyway around. I just do things moderately now, and it takes a little bit more time, but it fits my lifestyle better. I'm able to have some kind of balance. I'm still able to, go out and enjoy some food here and there. And it's also protective from a health standpoint. So it has in the past when I've had to get a little bit more aggressive if I haven't given myself enough time, but the last couple, I've done pretty long preps, and it hasn't interfered too much. But keep in mind, everyone's going to be a little bit different. I have some ladies that as soon as they get below 20% body fat, their bodies are like, what? And they might lose their cycle, and others, like myself, will keep it all the way down to just under 10% body fat. So I think there's certainly some individual differences there, but there are some key players that can really help, I think, improve your outcomes. And the safety in which you do it and the efficacy at which you diet. Obviously, we implement all of those processes here with Be a Body. How would you deal with having no support and to work out? Oh, goodness, that's challenging. I'm assuming that you mean like there isn't anybody in your circle of friends, family, loved ones that enjoys fitness the way that you do. I think I would start by saying, you don't need permission to pursue your health. Like, that is something that you have the right to show up for. So I'd probably reframe it, and rather than think about like the negative things, and I want to be empathetic to this because I can't imagine what that would be like, not having somebody that's also like interested in fitness, or at least somebody that you can talk to it about. But I would really try to reframe it and think about, the fact that you've got this, like, you can do this on your own. You don't need somebody to be there with you to implement a fitness goal. Set your schedule, choose what you want to do, and show up for yourself. Because sometimes that's all we've got. and to rely on somebody else as either motivation or just having the support, sometimes we're not going to have it. I know, like when I first moved from the US, from Australia to the US, like I had nobody. So, I took it upon myself to get my gym membership, to go and suss out like where I wanted to train. I got some good headphones, good music, and, I was going to be there regardless of whether I had somebody to go with or not. And for many years, I have trained on my own. So yeah, I would definitely reframe. Don't look at the negative things, or at least try to, think more about the positive things and what you can do, and that you can do this on your own. And it is, you deserve to have the time to go and look after your health. But outside of that, if you are looking for support, I mean, sometimes you've got to strike up a conversation with somebody in the gym and just get to know the people that are in the space that you train at often. And that might end up leading to a really great friendship. I know that's happened for me in many instances, and I've even become like good friends with clients who then I travel and we see. So, sometimes you've got to kind of put yourself out there a little bit, and it can be scary, but, it depends how much you value whatever it is that you're looking to get. So if it's worth it, I think you'll make the change. And then I think outside of like in-person connections, find a good community. There are so many groups, online that you can kind of just get acquainted with and just start chatting. I mean, even our workout app, Be a Fit, has a community, and I've noticed there's probably like a dozen or so ladies in there that are chatting pretty regularly and just supporting one another. And it doesn't have to be like super dramatic or a close friendship, but just getting a comment or a response or reply on a post that you've put up, where you've asked or made a complaint or just said something about how hard the week has been, just to have somebody acknowledge and validate, it's difficult. It's really hard. Oh my gosh, that goes so far. So like I'm always in the app, just commenting and talking to people because I know it means a lot to have that. So yeah, I would say subscribe to the app, get involved with our community of people, or look for some of those support groups online. I know even like my church has like so many different, weekday community groups that you can kind of join and get acquainted with. Some of them are like singles groups, couples groups. There's all kinds of groups. So yeah, I don't know whether that's something that you would be interested in getting involved with, but there is a lot of support out there. I think you just have to be willing to look for it and put yourself out there, which is always a little intimidating. What else have we got here? How are you feeling? Energy, sleep. I feel like we've talked about that one. Pretty low energy. I'd say like a 3 out of 10 has been my energy for the last 3 weeks, but I still try and show up for myself. I try to stay positive. I chose to do this. It's meant to be something that is fulfilling, and it is. It's just anything that's worth having usually requires some amount of sacrifice to get to. So yeah, I just remind myself, hey, like this is a choice, like get after it and love it. So yeah, I have low energy, but I'm feeling pretty good. What else? Did the correct Smith machine position for a leg or glute? Oh, that's a tough one. I don't think I quite understand your question, because you can do that in like a multitude of different ways. So if that same person has some time to message me on Instagram or send me an email, I can get back to you about it. I think that's probably about all in terms of what I've got time for today. Oh, hang on, there's a couple more good ones that I can probably answer. Foods to avoid during peak week. I've already covered that. Low FODMAPs. Consume low FODMAPs or no FODMAP foods. FODMAPs are the worst. Like, you just steer clear of them. Sugar, alcohols go. Sweeteners, obviously. Carbonated beverages, anything that's a gut irritant. 48 hours before it's done. Like, I will be drinking water, my least favorite type of fluid, for all of Friday, all of Saturday. It's just essential if you want to have a nice happy GI for show day. How to track volume for body weight exercises and Smith machine exercises when I'm unsure about the bar weight. So someone asked me this in our group on Thursday on our Q&A call. So the typical bar weight for a Smith machine will range somewhere between 50 and 30 pounds. I tend not to worry about what the bar weight is and focus on just what I'm putting on, and then thinking about my rate of perceived exertion. So again, so many Smith machines at different gyms have a different load. Some of them are like pressure gauged and they're really sticky. So even if the weight and the load say a certain thing, like it's just a really clunky machine. So it's much harder than if you were using something that was smooth on a roller. So yeah, I just try to focus on what I'm adding to the bar in the case of a Smith machine or some of the machines in general, like a hack squat or whatever. And then I think about the RPE. So what effort am I doing right now to do that number of repetitions? And there have been times where I'll load up what I usually do on a new machine and I can barely do 5 reps. So, you know, in those instances, I'll unstack the weights and I'll just do something that hits the RPE that I'm supposed to train at for the number of repetitions, you know, that is prescribed for my program. So yeah, that's how I tend to do it. And I'm consistent with that. And I usually just make notes in my program. And it is hard when you're always changing gyms and you've got different equipment. It's volume, unfortunately, becomes, it carries less weight, unfortunately, when you're not training in a consistent gym. But how to track volume for bodyweight exercises. If it's the right kind of bodyweight exercise, like a pull-up, I will put my actual weight to assign some volume. Some of the exercises like a lunge or a squat, you can put your weight, that's fine. But there are other movements where it doesn't make as much sense because, you know, you're not really lifting your entire body weight. So like a sit-up or some kind of abdominal exercise, I don't even have that available as an option, I don't think, in our app, because it doesn't make sense to me to have you put in a load for a sit-up. So instead, the way that you progress on those movements is you're looking to increase your reps, increasing sets, slowing down the tempo, you know, all those things that we talked about before. So that would be how you can progressively overload on an exercise that isn't necessarily going to give you an accurate or perfectly accurate weight. But if you wanted to assign some volume for like a crunch or a sit-up or something like that, you could definitely put in your body weight. And then for banded exercises, I know you didn't ask this, but people always ask. For our app, we actually give you an option to select extra light, light, moderate, heavy, very heavy, depending on what band you're using. And then it will assign like manufacturing standard weights or resistances so that you do track some volume. But yeah, otherwise, if you don't have access to those types of features in the app that you're using, then I would just make note of your, like the band resistance that you're choosing to use for that exercise. So again, you then modify sets, reps, tempo, until the point at which you can advance in the band, either making it heavier for some exercises, or in the case of pull-ups, you're trying to make it lighter. You want to do no assistance. So yeah, that's how you would do that. I hope my answer was clear. So yeah, I think that's about it for me for this week, guys. I appreciate all the awesome questions. And if there is any follow-up questions to today's video, feel free to drop them in the comments. My brain is absolutely frizzled and I am so ready just to get back to having some free time and some brain power, and I cannot wait to get a bit more energy back in the tank. But hey, I want to get to the Olympia. So if I don't place in this show, like I technically have to keep doing shows until I win one, because that's how you qualify. So now after this next weekend, I'm not even thinking past next weekend. But you know, if I come last, I will have to reconsider my choices and what I want to do, and maybe find some more shows. But sometimes it's easier to just pick and keep going while you're already lean. Other people like to have a few weeks off, you know, refuel, refresh, get some vitality back, and then, you know, jump in and do it again. So I'm not sure yet. I haven't even thought about this past or anything past this weekend. I'm just laser focused, and then we'll see how we go. But yeah, I hope you guys found that interesting and helpful, and I will see you on the other side. Bye, guys.